And hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 11 of the HUSECcast, the HUSECCon podcast. Sam and I today are talking to John Burns, who's a principal industrial hunter over at Dragos. We talk about a pretty cool article around a new framework that MITRE's got coming out called the Embed framework. And then it's EMB3D. And then we have John talk about kind of his origin story, which I'm not going to spoil it in the intro, but it's pretty funny. And then we talk about his talk at HUSECCon, which is around the differences in threat hunting in IT spaces and OT spaces. Very important topic these days. So hope you enjoy the podcast. See you there. Sam, we are on episode 11. Can you believe this?
I'm shocked. I'm shocked that we've gotten this far.
We have made it this far. I've literally heard a few people say this, and I don't know how real this is, but that most podcasts end before episode 10. Like people just don't want to do it anymore. So we have officially broken through that barrier.
I think that's some sort of a curse that, since we all dabble in the magical and security, right? So I think that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're past it. Well, I'm happy for that. We'll keep going. We're not going to stop. Joining us today, Sam, is somebody you're quite familiar with. Maybe you want to introduce him.
Yeah, I know this guy. So this guy I work with, right? John Burns, and John Burns joins us from Dragos. He came to come talk about what his talk at HUSECCon this past year.
Yep, John. So you're a principal industrial hunter. It doesn't say threat hunter. It just says principal industrial hunter. So we'll let you get into later what that is, but that's your title, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't worry about the threat part in there anymore since I stopped being a senior industrial threat hunter, because then the acronym was SITH, which, as Sam knows, I like the SITH. So PIF doesn't sound as good. So I'm like, I don't care about the threat part anymore.
Yeah. John and I have a fundamental disagreement on the ways of Star Wars. So anyway, we'll leave that for a different episode.
We need to do another podcast on that. That will be good. All right. Well, John, we will definitely get back to your talk here in a little bit and discuss all things John Burns. But first of all, we're going to talk about HUSECCon, as we always do. So we have got two big announcements coming very soon, 2024. Be on the lookout for those. Just some great news, Sam. I don't want to spoil it yet, but we do have some announcements coming out. Very exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's super, super exciting, and can't wait to get those out the door and get people, marking their calendars for the new stuff. So that's a hint in the right direction. Hint. So the other thing to note is that we will be opening our call for presenters on May 1st. We're doing it earlier this year so we can get everything closed by the end of May. So we are not going to be doing a long 8-week period. This is a 4-week period. We're asking for folks to submit just based on our experience to make sure we get everybody in quickly. But we also want to make sure we have the agenda out by the end of July. So the idea here is to get everyone coming in, get there. So we have time to get through all the submittals. We tend to get a lot. It's a difficult process to get things selected. But make sure you put that May 1st on your calendar. And if you're the procrastinator type, then put May 31st on your calendar as the deadline.
Yeah, well, May 31st is the deadline. It absolutely is the deadline. So, but we hope to get those out soon, or get those out quicker, like you said, so we can get the agenda out quicker as well. And speaking again of HUSECCon, final thing, we are now taking sponsors. So if you are a vendor or someone out there who wants to sponsor HUSECCon in 2024, let us know. We will sell out of those spots as well, and we need to make sure we get everybody in there that wants to be in there. So please, again, now we're going to have more spots because we're going to the George R. Brown Convention Center, as we've announced before, but we will run out of those spots. So please jump in as soon as you can. We are taking those now. If you just go on our website, look for the info button or look for the sponsor button, or you can send an email to sponsorwrangler@HoustonSecCon.com, and we'll get that info out to you. All right. Anything else, Sam, before we jump into news?
Small correction or small addition to what I had mentioned about the CFP. We are shooting for the end of June for all the submittals to be. You'll get your acceptance or rejection email by then. Hopefully, the acceptance one. But where the whole plan here is just to make sure everyone gets the agenda out quicker.
Yep. Yeah. End of June is when we'll get announced. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, let's jump into the news segment. So this being an OT talk or an OT kind of focused, which got a lot of OT podcasts here, Sam. We need to get into the IT world sometime, but whatever.
Hey, what's hot is hot. You can't deny it. It is what it is.
It definitely is hot. So MITRE is debuting. It's just in draft form right now, but they're coming out with a threat model for embedded systems called Embed, EMB3D, and cannot remember off the top of my head what that stands for, but it's something cool. But we'll get into the article. But there was a dark reading article, and it's been in several other places, and you actually can pick it up straight from MITRE. But it's a draft of a new threat modeling framework for makers of embedded systems, specifically used in critical infrastructure environments. They're trying to create a common understanding of vulnerabilities, as the dark reading article says, and their technologies that attacks are targeting. But what I thought was interesting about this, other than this being needed, it actually kind of dovetails a little bit off of Sam, off of our last podcast that we did, which was talking about secure by design concepts. So this is not, they're specifically building this not to have somebody bolt security controls onto embedded systems, but to do by design, have the security built in there. So looking at all of the things that happen and what attacks happen on embedded systems, and learning how, and hopefully building anything new that you've got coming out based on what those attacks are, so it's secure right out of the gate versus if you're going to redesign something, even to redesign it with security built into it. So thought it was a cool initiative. Honestly, really interested, John, in, because of what you do, what your take is on this coming out. And I don't know if you know anybody. It's in collaboration with 2 or 3 different organizations, but if you know anybody that's seen the draft, or if there's anything you have there. But
I haven't seen any draft of it yet. I'm looking forward to checking it out. Same as you. I like the idea of using it as like a way to determine the vulnerabilities and kind of like the MITRE attack framework. I like that part of it. The piece for secure by design, I think it'll be a long way out before we see any kind of benefit from that. Just the nature of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I mean, when I was out in the field, I saw 20-year-old PLCs, and that was 12 years ago. They're probably still there. As long as they're still running the infrastructure or the facility, they won't change them. So I think it'll be a while before we see any benefit from the secure by design, but I like this progress and the steps being taken.
Yeah, the direction's right. I mean, we certainly need to get there, but this is kind of like we've been lagging behind on the industrial side for all of this for many, many years, and for a lot of reasons. But it's a good thing that we're looking at it, just like looking ahead 4, 5, 6, a decade out as to what's to come, because there will be new transformational technologies in these environments, and if we can get ahead of the security aspect of it, that's a wonderful thing. But to John's point, there's a lot of stuff out there that is just not going to get fixed anytime soon, and it doesn't need to be, right? Because it's got a proper architectural design where it's defensible.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a proper architectural design, you've got compensating controls put in place, you can get through some. I mean, you have to in some of these systems. You can't start trying to mess with them. Obviously, we've had that discussion many times on this podcast and outside of this podcast. But the fact that you've got something that's kind of an equivalent to like a MITRE attack or a CWE or something, that you're looking at common weaknesses that are happening out there, and then being able to plan for those. And some of those things will change, but you got to have a framework in place in the first place to be able to get new versions of it later on. So I definitely like the direction, but completely understand that when it has a real effect we don't know yet. It's going to be a while. So anyway. All right. Well, that's it for the news, everybody. Thanks for feedback, guys. And we are going to go on a break. And on the other side of the break, we will be focused on Mr. John Burns, all thing John Burns, all thing about his talk at HUSECCon. Really interested in that. And so, yeah, see you on the other side of the break. All right, back from the break, and we are going to talk to Mr. John Burns. So, John, again, principal industrial hunter at Dragos. So, give us a little bit of background on yourself. I mean, not when you were born, but I mean, you can if you want, if that has a direct impact on why you chose this. Maybe you were born in a plant somewhere, but no, give us some background on yourself, why you do threat hunting, what get your juices flowing for that, and then we'll talk about your HUSECCon talk after that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I grew up with my dad doing industrial stuff. He started out doing electrical kind of technician type work, and he was the guy that would always raise his hand whenever they offered training to go learn something new. And then he would just use that training to kind of move up and down to different organizations and move up the chain. And eventually he got into programming PLCs and actually programmable logic controllers, and doing that out in the field as a systems integrator. So in high school, at least, I would spend breaks sometimes helping him if he had a startup or something going on. I'd be out there with him on a plant floor running up and down. I remember one time in a citrus plant when they were doing the boxing and they were sorting by barcode the different boxes. I had a walkie-talkie. I was at the other end of the lines, and he was at the front of the line plugged into the PLC, and they'd send a box down, and then I would tell him which belt it went down, and then we'd reset and do it again and over again. And that was I think that was a Christmas break one year I did that. So that I had a lot of fun doing that. So
wait a minute. So what you're saying is I was not too far off.
No, not too far off.
Like
John is actually, John is actually a Cabbage Patch Kid. So yeah.
and funny thing was, for those that are familiar with ProSoft Technologies, my parents both worked for ProSoft in its early stages when it was first starting up. And my first job in high school in the summer was I actually built programming cables for the MCM modules for ProSoft in my living room while watching TV cool. During high school. So
this
that was
my
first
family affair, is what I'm hearing here.
Yeah,
absolutely
awesome.
A family affair.
Really awesome.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I spent my college, my time in college working for a systems integrator doing Gopher work. And then I did a little bit of IT after college, and then circled back to the systems integrator route. And I started out doing network administration and HMI programming, and then picked up PLC programming and did that for a number of years before decided we wanted to move. That was in California. We decided we wanted to move to Houston. So I got a job with Shell Pipeline in their control center, helping to rebuild the SCADA infrastructure when they were upgrading, and then stayed around for a few years to manage it before I got the job with Dragos. I'd always wanted to do cybersecurity. I just couldn't really break in. So everything I did was all self-taught, and I just kind of self-motivated and volunteering for projects. So, but my field experience is what piqued their interest for me to come over to Dragos, because I had experience in multiple plants and industries. So I've been here for about just over 5 years now. So
and then Sam does it enough. I'll talk up Dragos a little bit here. That just you seem to be the type of person that Dragos attracts, right? It's just that self-taught, self-motivated, just want to have fun. Been doing this for a while. Very curious type of individual. I know Rob's like that too, right? So it's just like, it's amazing to see that continue. That's a great culture over there. So Sam, there's your commercial. They did not sponsor this podcast, by the way.
I'm not going to say any more. I'm not going to say any more to that, because you did a great job with that, Michael. So thank you.
Am I hired? Did I get hired?
Yeah. Okay. We got a position open for you, man. So
I'll send Rob a bill for this retroactively. Like you sponsored the podcast and you didn't know it. Well, that's awesome. So you've been at Dragos, and you said 5 years now?
Yeah, just about 5.5. Yeah.
Okay. And I know you said you changed roles a little bit, but have you always done threat hunting stuff, or did you do other stuff at Dragos before you got into the threat hunting?
when I started, I got brought on board. It was called senior operations analyst. And it was basically there was a customer that wanted the platform, but they didn't have anybody to manage the platform and run it. So they hired Dragos back to provide them somebody to run the platform for them. So I did that for the first few years, couple 3 years. And then we grew into the OT watch team, which is now the managed threat hunting team. So that as we added more customers into that model that wanted that, you can't scale one person per customer very easily. So we went to more of the team aspect. And so it kind of pivoted from full managing the platform to just threat hunting.
Gotcha. I mean, Sam, I know you know John and what he does and all those roles, but any questions you want to ask him there?
No, I think that kind of segues into the next thing. Like from that perspective, what are you doing day to day now in the role that you have?
I spend a lot of time in meetings. We do a lot of, we're doing more and more threat hunting. We're kind of working on automating our threat hunting and kind of using scripting to do it, to make it more streamlined and scalable, because we're just adding so many customers to the OT watch team that you just can't do the one-off, one hunt, one customer kind of hunt anymore. You've got to be able to do it across multiple customers at the same time. We're constantly looking for threats. We have a set of hunting triggers we look for every day in every customer, and then any kind of emerging threats we'll adapt to those, and we'll run checks on those. A good example is back in the summer when the Rockwell vulnerability was coming out. Before that came out, we actually got on board with it before that was announced, and we were helping look for signs of those vulnerabilities in all of our customers, and then relaying that working with our intel team to get all that messaging ready to send it out, and to kind of help look for those vulnerabilities and any activity that was maybe taking advantage of those vulnerabilities ahead of time. So that's the kind of stuff we do day to day.
So when I think threat hunting, I think there's like a interesting, it's a difference. I mean, I know we're going to talk about what you're talking about is differences in IT and OT threat hunting, but generally when I talk about any kind of threat hunting that, I've had people do for me, or I've had like MDRs do for our customers, that kind of thing, is generally focused around an adversary being active in an environment and looking for them to take advantage of the vulnerability. But you made kind of a distinction there where you're helping actually look for vulnerabilities. Also, maybe they don't even you don't know about there being an exploit yet for that vulnerability, but you're trying to hunt that down to find and get them prepared for it. Is that a distinction that you would say is a difference or not?
I can definitely help. I know a lot of people like looking for the hands-on keyboard badness, and that's kind of like what gets people's juices flowing. And it's cool. I like it. But I think in just like we talked about earlier, the nature of the way things are segmented and kind of the security in depth, you're not going to find that a lot of the time. It's not going to be as prevalent as maybe, an IT connected system, internet connected system, like on the enterprise side. But so I like, personally, my opinion is I like looking for and finding the opportunity for an adversary to take advantage of, and then shutting that door before they can even find that the door even exists. And so I like finding misconfigurations and the potential vulnerabilities that can be used, but before they can be taken advantage of. That's what I like, to do.
Cool. So it's almost like you're doing kind of a continuous assessment type of there. So I mean, I could see why you wouldn't necessarily have threat in front of hunter. I mean, it depends, there's all the definitions that go with threat, risk, and everything else, but generally you're doing more than what I would consider a typical, and you said an IT threat hunt. You're doing a little more than that. So
yeah, and I think the biggest, like I touched on it in the presentation, I think the biggest difference, in my opinion, between the OT and the IT side of threat hunting is on the OT side, there are different motivations and different consequences. One of the biggest thing that people talk about is, one of my favorite examples is somebody said OT is pretty much IT with consequences. So there's, OT is IT with OT is IT with physics is another way that some people have phrased it. But, there's a difference between you take a email server down and you don't go have email for a couple hours. And my response is, okay. And so my day is a little quieter for a couple hours, not too bad. But, you take an OT system down or compromise an OT system. Now you're talking, multiple millions of dollars lost, possible loss of life, not just for employees, but for consumers on the other end as well. So to me, it's a lot more that you need to take into account when you're doing your threat hunting, not just money motivations.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say is a primary motivator is a business motivator versus, you could literally like spread poison gas over an area or something, so makes sense.
Yep.
Just hope you don't need that pair of Vans for Christmas this year.
I mean, yeah, you're pissing off an exec versus, taking out a neighborhood. I mean, there is a difference. As much as we need the business to keep running, there's a huge difference. Well, I mean, so you opened up the can there, John. Give us a deeper level rundown on what you talked about at HUSECCon and what those differences are.
Yeah, happy to. So there's the typical threat landscape is, you look at the attack surface on the cyber domain, and then you're kind of like, what is the attack surface for a normal enterprise? You've got your DMZ, your email servers, your web servers, and how you connect to the internet, that kind of stuff. The way I like to do stuff is I do take more of a consequence driven approach, where I flip it and I start at the physical and work backwards to what are the cyber components. And the best reason for doing that is it's a good way to prioritize what you're going to hunt on, because in an OT environment, you can have hundreds or thousands of PLCs or different interconnected systems that are out running different parts of the plants, or, in a pipeline system, for example, that I used to work in, it crossed from California to the East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, all across the US. So it's like, where do you start? So the best way to do it is you ask the question, what's a bad day? And you just start working what could be the worst things that could happen. And then you identify the physical systems. You work through a process of identifying the physical systems that would need to be have an effect done to them to cause that physical effect. That would be the bad day. And then you just keep working your way up. Okay, what system connects to that physical? What, if I need to take this, I need to blow up this tank. Okay, well, what connects to that tank? Okay, it's this PLC runs the devices on that tank. Okay, what connects to that PLC? It's this HMI, or this data concentrator upstream. And you just eventually work your way back up till you hit that cyber connection, and you work your way up the stream to your attack surface. And then you can start figuring out, okay, this is my priorities. It doesn't tell you everything, but at least gives you a priority basis. So you're not looking at some little tank farm out in the middle of nowhere that no one's going to target anyways. You're kind of looking at your most likely bad day scenarios. It's the ranking I try to use is it's least, it's least likely, least dangerous to most likely, most dangerous. So it's kind of like what your ranking system is. So you start at the most likely, most dangerous, and then work your way down when you're doing your hunting. So
the concept generally from where you're going to focus your priorities on any, like if you're doing a risk assessment or if you're doing a threat hunt or any of that stuff, you're still looking for the things that are going to cause the most problems, whether it's business motivated or, OT motivated, as we're talking about here. So not a major difference there.
Yeah.
But when you get down into the weeds, there's definitely a lot of difference. Do you do that based on, I don't know if not everybody, and I'm not as deep into the weeds OT as everybody else is on this call normally, but, familiar with things like, the Purdue model, that kind of thing. Are you looking at those and using those in your daily, what you're thinking about because you kind of describe layers, right? When you just talked about that.
So yeah, the Purdue model is great for when you're talking, you're trying to relay the different sides. Like if you're trying to see what's, if this device is in the layer 1, the process control layer, and if it's talking directly to something that's in your layer 4 enterprise without going through a DMZ, that's an you don't really want that. So that's something you identify. But the other layers that we're talking about is like in the threat landscape, there's like the level 0, which is process. Level 1 is your basic control, and then level 2 is your supervisory control. And your supervisory control and your basic control are kind of like up at the cyber domain and right at that cyber physical interconnect. And then your level 0 process control, that's in the physical domain. So there's 2 type of levels of things you want to look at, for what I'm doing. When I'm doing the consequence, when we're doing the consequence driven analysis, we're looking more at the landscape and breaking down the physical to the cyber. And then when we're actually looking at the traffic, now we're looking more at the Purdue level and looking at that L1 through L5 or however they different places categorize it.
Gotcha. So like
depending on who you're,
go ahead.
Sorry.
Sam. Go
ahead. I was going to say, depending on who you talk to, is that bad day going to be different?
Yep, it can be. So you talk to somebody at one plant, they're going to tell you their bad day is what's going to happen at their plant. So you kind of gotta go upstream a little bit and see, like, the ultimate bad day if you can, or you just take a culmination of bad days and you just try to prioritize them the best you can. And sometimes you may have competing priorities, and you just got to do the best you can with it.
So you base it on the difference that you have in IT and OT, and depending, again, how you look at it from a Purdue model or whatever, but at some point you've got a delineation between the OT systems and the IT systems, and at that level where they connect. So where, I mean, it gets at some point you've got to hand off, right? You've got to go, okay, maybe this came through the IT systems to get to here, and I noticed it, or whatever. How do you see that interaction generally happening? Is that, I mean, it's a horrible question probably, but is that generally a good experience, a bad experience? It kind of varies depending on, how much cooperation the IT and the OT folks have within, or do you even have run into where the departments are the same and you can talk the language on the both sides? What do you generally find?
It does definitely vary. I mean, I work with a variety. I work with some control systems teams that have no idea what cybersecurity is, so we kind of work with them. And then we work with, and on the other side, we also work with IT security teams that have no idea what a control system is or how it works. So when you're doing the handoff from the control side from the OT side to the IT side, obviously, if you're working with the IT people, that's easier because you're just handing it off and saying, "Hey, I'm seeing this." But if you're talking to like an OT team or an OT security team that isn't in the IT, now you've got to kind of relay that information to them. And then it's up to however their relationship is with their IT team to kind of pass that information up and work together. One of my coworkers, Leslie Carhart, has a good phrase for it: marriage counseling. Essentially, you're kind of helping be the marriage counselor to kind of bridge that OT IT gap, and hopefully we can talk on both sides of the fence and kind of help bridge that gap in that relationship so that they can work better together.
Yeah, I was almost gonna say translator, right? But yeah, the marriage counselor is a more apt metaphor, I think, just because you've got to play that game. So kind of similar to have in a lot of getting people to talk each other, just don't have the same conceptual knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I was guilty of it back in the day. There's a lot of OT people that are very adversarial with IT, and I was guilty of it back in the day where I was like, nope, keep IT out. This is completely different. I don't want them touching our OT systems. And the more I get into this side of it and cybersecurity and the way we get to more, the homogenous systems where everything's kind of the same and interconnected and stuff, you need both sides. You need everybody to work on this and to fix it.
Well, I think the difference with the IT side is they didn't know you existed, right? So it's like, what the heck is OT? But now it seems to be getting better over time. Sam, you've seen this over years and years and years. I mean, you've been on both sides too, right? So
I have been on both sides, and I think part of it's that it was never under the directive of IT, in a lot of places to address the areas, and that's only becoming more prevalent now. Especially as a lot of these things, I think there's 7 known malwares now for ICS targeted attacks. And as those things happen, it became more and more. And then with geopolitical issues happening and things like that, it is becoming a concern. And even with stuff like ransomware bleeding over into OT, which is another big problem, it's in large part architecture and things you can do that were never addressed because they were their own little areas. And I still to this day work with customers that aren't all convinced that they need to be part of the IT journey, right? But you still need to collaborate to some degree. And it's not like anyone's trying to bring anybody down. It's just that is the way things are going. And at the end of the day, if a company has a, chief digital officer or somebody that has, or transformation going on, it's going to pull OT along with it, and you have no choice. So have the conversation. Right. But we also need to get better at getting those folks better understood, right, in the field than just trying to dictate from the C level down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting the cooperation, getting the explanation between the two. That could be another hint about one of those things we're talking about earlier on. Maybe, Sam. I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe. Well, John, any final thoughts before we close this off?
No, I mean, kind of the way I said it in the at the end of my talk, which is the kind of the point I wanted to drive home at the end of the talk, was there are different levels of threat hunting. You know, you could be as simple as a quick indicator compromise search that some people would say isn't threat hunting, but to me, you're still looking for a threat, so I still call it threat hunting. All the way up to a multi-month involved research project threat hunt. And the whole point I was trying to say was, regardless of what you do, do it. If you're not looking for something, you're not going to find it 100% of the time. So at least get out there and hunt and do something with whatever you got. So
great point. I cannot disagree with anything you just said. If you ain't looking, if you don't play, you're not going to win.
Yep. Sounds like work.
Well, when you're having fun, it's hard to call it work.
I was about to say, John sounds like he's having fun.
You guys do some cool stuff over there. It's fun to hear the things that we get to hear internally on it. So you guys do a lot of really cool things. Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, John, really appreciate you coming on here. Appreciate you speaking at HUSECCon as well. Hopefully you can come out again and at the very least attend the conference, but we'd love to have you come speak out again as well. So
it's marked on my calendar every year to submit to present at HUSECCon. It's a fun conference to do. So I look forward to submitting something. I just got to figure out what I want to talk on this time.
Cool stuff. Well, appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. Yep. Sam.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
Yeah, man. Sam, anything from your side?
No, thanks, John. Appreciate it. Always great. Love to have you on the team. And from a professional perspective, almost as much. I love that almost as much as having Michael on my team with HUSECCon. So
almost. Appreciate
almost.
That. Hey, just two bald guys you get to work with. There's nothing wrong with that.
I'm gonna go get a bald cap so that I can.
Just shave it. No, I do not give up on that.
My wife would never let that happen. Sorry.
I wish I had that hair, man. Golly. Did not get those genes. Yep. All right. Well, again, John, thank you. Sam, as always, good to see you. And I will close out episode 11. See everybody on episode 12. Bye-bye.